"You will attend your brother's wedding, Allison, or I am cutting off your tuition." Those words hit me like a freight train as I sat in our family living room, staring at my father's stern face. 24 years of being the overlooked daughter, and now he was threatening the one thing that meant everything to me: my education, my future, all because I dared to prioritize my final computer science project over playing bridesmaid to my golden brother Marcus. The ultimatum hung in the air, like smoke choking out any hope I had that things might finally change in our family. Before I dive into this family drama that changed everything, I would love to know where you are watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories. Trust me, you will not believe how this ends. Growing up in our Colorado home, the hierarchy was crystal clear. Marcus could do no wrong, while I seemed to do nothing right. I remember being 8 years old, begging our parents to let me attend a summer coding camp. The brochure promised kids would learn to build websites and create simple games. I was fascinated by computers, spending hours on our old desktop trying to figure out how programs worked. But Dad looked at the $300 fee and shook his head. "We cannot afford extras right now, Allison. Maybe next year." That same month, Marcus announced he wanted piano lessons. Without hesitation, Dad signed him up for weekly sessions at $60 each, plus bought him a used upright piano for $800. Marcus quit after 6 months, claiming piano was boring. The piano gathered dust in our living room for years, a constant reminder of the different standards we lived by. Christmas mornings painted the clearest picture of favoritism. When Marcus turned 16, he unwrapped a brand new MacBook Pro, complete with professional editing software. Dad beamed as Marcus fumbled with the expensive machine, talking about how it would help him create amazing projects. When I turned 16 2 years later, I opened a box containing used textbooks for advanced placement classes. "Your education is important," Mom said softly, avoiding my eyes. "These will help you get into a good college." Birthday parties followed the same pattern. Marcus always had elaborate celebrations with 20 or 30 friends, complete with catered food and expensive decorations. Our backyard would transform into party central, with Dad manning the grill and Mom organizing games. For my birthdays, we had quiet family dinners with store-bought cake. "Nothing wrong with simple celebrations," Dad would say when I asked why my parties felt so different. The message was always the same: Marcus has potential, he will make something of himself. The words became Dad's mantra, repeated to neighbors, relatives, and anyone who would listen. Marcus was destined for greatness, while I was simply expected to do well in school. Good grades were not celebrated in our house when they came from me. They were obligatory, like brushing teeth or taking out trash. Throughout high school, I maintained a perfect 4.0 grade average. I was valedictorian of my graduating class, earned a full academic scholarship to Colorado State University, and received early acceptance into their competitive computer science program. The day my acceptance letter arrived, I ran into the house clutching the envelope, heart pounding with excitement. Dad glanced at the letter and nodded. "Good for you, Allison. Nice hobby you have got there." Marcus barely graduated high school with a 2.1 average. He spent more time at parties than in classrooms, frequently called in sick, and once got suspended for cheating on a history exam. Yet, when he announced plans to attend community college for business classes, Dad practically threw a celebration. "My son is going to be an entrepreneur," he told our neighbor, Mrs. Peterson. "He has that natural business instinct you cannot teach. The double standard cut deep every single time." When I made the dean's list, my freshman year, Dad simply said, "Good grades were expected, not celebrated." When Marcus passed his first semester with mostly C grades, Dad bought him a congratulatory dinner at his favorite steakhouse. Different expectations led to different rewards, and I was always holding the shorter stick. By my junior year, I had stopped sharing academic achievements with my parents. What was the point? My computer science professors praised my innovative projects, classmates sought my help with complex programming assignments, and I consistently ranked in the top 5% of my class. But at home, these accomplishments meant nothing. My success was invisible, overshadowed by Marcus's mediocrity that somehow sparkled brighter than my excellence. The invisibility extended beyond academics. Dad never asked about my internship applications, my career goals, or my thoughts about the future. He assumed I would graduate, find some entry-level job, and eventually settle down, like most women in his generation had done. Marcus, however, received constant attention and advice about his plans, even though he changed majors 3 times and still had no clear direction after 2 years of community college. During my sophomore year at Colorado State, desperation drove me to action. If my family would not recognize my potential, I would prove it elsewhere. I started taking on small web development projects for local businesses, charging modest fees while building my portfolio. Late nights in the computer lab became my sanctuary, where I coded websites for bakeries, auto shops, and small restaurants around town. My first real success came junior year, when I approached a local restaurant chain struggling with online orders. They had 5 locations, but no cohesive digital presence. I proposed creating a mobile app that would streamline ordering, delivery tracking, and customer loyalty programs. The owner, Sarah Martinez, was skeptical about hiring a college student, but agreed to let me present a prototype. 3 sleepless weeks later, I demonstrated a fully functional app that impressed not only Sarah, but her business partners. The user interface was intuitive, the back-end system robust, and the integration with their existing point-of-sale system seamless. They offered me a contract worth $45,000 to complete the full development and provide 6 months of technical support. My hands shook as I signed the contract. $45,000 was more money than I had ever imagined earning, especially as a student. The app launched 3 months later and immediately increased their online orders by 60%. Local tech blogs featured articles about the innovative young developer who had transformed a struggling restaurant chain. Sarah recommended me to other business owners, and suddenly I had more work than I could handle. Nobody in my family knew about this success. They never asked how I spent my time outside of classes, assuming I was just studying or hanging out with friends. When Dad occasionally inquired about money, I would mention my part-time job at the campus library, which paid minimum wage for 10 hours per week. The real money from my development work remained my secret. By senior year, I had earned over $90,000 from various projects. I invested wisely in stocks, and cryptocurrency watched my portfolio grow and maintained a healthy savings account. My professors began recommending me for prestigious internships at major tech companies. Google, Microsoft, and Apple all expressed interest in my work. I had 6-figure job offers waiting for after graduation. Yet at home, I was still just Allison, who played with computers. Dad continued paying my tuition, completely unaware that I could cover those costs myself several times over. I let him pay because challenging the arrangement would require explanations I was not ready to give. The money he spent on my education was a fraction of what I was earning, but to him, it represented a significant sacrifice that he never let me forget. The secrecy was not about hiding success, but about protecting myself from inevitable disappointment. If my family knew about my achievements, they would find ways to diminish them or redirect credit elsewhere. Better to succeed quietly than to have that success minimized or ignored completely. Everything changed the week Marcus announced his engagement to Stephanie Richardson, daughter of prominent attorney David Richardson. The family celebration was immediate and overwhelming. Finally, Marcus is settling down with a quality woman Dad announced to anyone within earshot. Stephanie came from old money-attended private schools and carried herself with the confidence that comes from never worrying about finances. In Dad's eyes, she was proof that Marcus had truly made it. Wedding planning began immediately with a budget that made my stomach turn. $60,000 for one day seemed absolutely insane, but Dad and Mom were determined to give Marcus the wedding of his dreams. They contributed $20,000 from their retirement savings money I knew they could not afford to lose. Stephanie's family covered the majority of remaining costs, but our parents insisted on paying for Flower's photography and the rehearsal dinner. I was assigned the role of bridesmaid, which came with its own financial obligations. The dress alone cost $800, not including shoes, hair, makeup, and travel expenses for the destination wedding weekend. When I hesitated about the dress cost, Dad exploded. "This is your brother's big day, Allison. Family comes first, and if you cannot support him now, when can you?" The guilt trip worked, and I reluctantly agreed to purchase the overpriced gown. 3 weeks before the wedding, my final semester became increasingly demanding. My capstone project required developing a comprehensive software solution for a real-world client, and the presentation was scheduled for the same day as Marcus's wedding rehearsal. This presentation was worth 30% of my final grade and would be attended by potential employers scouting for new graduates. I approached Dad, carefully explaining the conflict and asking if I could skip the rehearsal while still attending the actual wedding. The reaction was explosive and immediate. "Your education can wait," he shouted. "Family comes first, and your brother's wedding happens once in a lifetime. You can reschedule some school presentation." I tried explaining that university presentations cannot be rescheduled, that missing this would severely impact my grade and job prospects. Dad was unmoved. "You have been in school for 4 years," he said. "One day will not make or break your future, but missing your brother's rehearsal will damage family relationships forever." The argument escalated in our kitchen while Mom stood silently by the sink, unwilling to intervene. Dad's frustration boiled over into the ultimatum that would change everything. "You will choose right now, Allison, your brother's wedding or your tuition. I have supported you for 4 years, and I can stop that support anytime I want. Do not test me on this." The threat hung in the air like poison gas. 4 years of tuition payments were being held hostage for one day of wedding festivities. In that moment, I realized how little my father understood about my life, my goals, or my capabilities. He saw me as completely dependent on his financial support, unaware that I had been financially independent for over 2 years. But something else bothered me about this whole situation. Marcus's sudden transformation into successful businessman seemed suspicious. I decided to do some investigation into my brother's actual financial situation before making any major decisions about the wedding or my relationship with family. What I discovered was eye-opening. Marcus worked in insurance sales for a small firm in Denver, earning approximately $38,000 annually before taxes. He lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in a mediocre complex, and our parents had been subsidizing his rent for the past 18 months. Credit card statements that I glimpsed during a family dinner revealed debts totaling nearly $15,000. Stephanie's family was clearly disappointed with Marcus's financial prospects. Conversations I overheard during engagement party planning revealed their concerns about his ability to provide for their daughter. The Richardson family was effectively bankrolling the entire wedding while maintaining polite facades about being thrilled with the match. Armed with this information, I made my decision. I would attend the wedding and fulfill my bridesmaid duties, but I would also be prepared to set the record straight about success in our family if the opportunity arose. Marcus could have his perfect day, but I would not continue letting my achievements be invisible while his mediocrity was celebrated. The wedding day arrived with Colorado spring weather at its finest. Mountain View Country Club provided a stunning backdrop with snow-capped peaks visible through floor-to-ceiling windows in the reception hall. 200 guests mingled on terraces overlooking manicured golf courses, sipping cocktails, and admiring the elaborate decorations that had cost more than most people's annual salaries. Marcus looked confident in his custom tuxedo, moving through the crowd and accepting congratulations from Stephanie's family friends. These guests were successful attorneys, doctors, and business owners who assumed Marcus belonged in their social circle. Dad had spent the morning coaching Marcus on conversation topics, reminding him to mention his business degree and future entrepreneurial plans. The ceremony itself was beautiful in an expensive, orchestrated way. Stephanie looked radiant in her designer gown, and Marcus played his part perfectly as the successful young businessman ready to start a family. Dad wiped tears from his eyes during the vows, clearly overwhelmed with pride for his golden son's achievement in landing such an impressive bride. I stood with the other bridesmaids, wearing the ridiculously expensive dress and forcing smiles for photographs that would commemorate this day forever. The irony was not lost on me. Here I was, celebrating my brother's wedding to a woman whose family was essentially buying him, while my own legitimate success remained completely unknown to everyone present. During the cocktail hour, conversations swirled around Marcus's bright future. Stephanie's relatives asked polite questions about his career prospects, and Marcus exaggerated his role at the insurance company, making himself sound like a rising executive rather than an entry-level salesperson struggling to meet monthly quotas. Dad enthusiastically supported these embellishments, adding details about Marcus's natural leadership abilities and business instincts. The reception began with dinner and toasts. Dad stood to address the crowd, his voice thick with emotion as he spoke about his pride in Marcus for finding both success and love. He mentioned the sacrifices our family had made to support Marcus's dreams, painting a picture of a young man who had overcome challenges through determination and hard work. The guests applauded politely, though I noticed some subtle eye rolls from Stephanie's side of the family. As dinner continued, the conversation at our family table turned to careers and achievements. Uncle Robert, Dad's older brother, had always been particularly vocal about his opinions on appropriate life choices for young women. He turned his attention to me, asking about my studies with barely concealed condescension. Still playing with computers, Allison, when are you going to get a real job and settle down like your brother? The question was loud enough for nearby tables to hear, and several guests turned to listen to my response. Marcus joined the conversation, adding his own commentary about my impractical career choice. Yeah, sis, should find something more practical than coding. Not many opportunities for women in tech anyway. Dad could not resist adding his perspective to the public discussion. I am not paying for her degree forever, he announced with a laugh that encouraged others to join in. She needs to figure out something realistic before graduation. The laughter from our table spread to neighboring tables, and suddenly I was the entertainment for the evening, the family disappointment being gently mocked by her own relatives. Stephanie's father, David Richardson, seemed genuinely curious about the conversation and asked Marcus directly about his salary and career trajectory. Marcus's response was filled with vague references to commissions, advancement opportunities, and networking connections that would lead to bigger things. David nodded politely, but his expression suggested skepticism about these grand claims. The breaking point came suddenly and without warning. Wine had been flowing freely throughout dinner, and conversations had become looser, more revealing. I had been watching my family perform for hours, pretending Marcus was something he was not, while treating me like an embarrassing relative who needed to be managed rather than celebrated. Uncle Robert's condescending questions had been bad enough, but when Marcus joined in, mocking my career choice, something inside me snapped. Years of accumulated frustration, disappointment, and anger boiled over in that moment. I stood up slowly, wine glass in hand, and the conversation at our table gradually quieted. "I have an announcement about success in our family," I said clearly, my voice carrying across the immediate area. Nearby tables turned to listen, expecting another wedding toast or family story. Dad's expression showed mild confusion, mixed with annoyance, that I was interrupting the celebration. "Everyone has been talking about success tonight, and I think it is time for some honesty." I looked directly at Marcus, then at Dad, before addressing the wider audience. Marcus makes $38,000 a year selling insurance. He lives in a subsidized apartment and has $15,000 in credit card debt. The reaction was immediate. Gasps from several tables, shocked silence from others. Stephanie's face went pale, while her parents exchanged meaningful glances. Dad's face turned red with embarrassment and rage, but I was not finished. I made $92,000 last year from my web development business. I have contracts worth over $200,000 waiting for me after graduation. I have been supporting my own education for 2 years while letting Dad think he was paying for it. I pulled out my phone and showed my bank account balance to the stunned table. 6 figures earned through the computer skills you all think are just a hobby. The silence was deafening. Marcus stared at the phone screen in disbelief while Dad's mouth opened and closed without sound. Uncle Robert looked like he had been slapped, his condescending expression replaced with shock and embarrassment. "I did not need your tuition threats, Dad," I continued. "I needed your respect. I needed my family to see my achievements instead of constantly diminishing them while celebrating mediocrity. But that respect had to be earned, and apparently success was the only currency you understood." The aftermath was immediate and chaotic. Some guests began whispering among themselves, processing the revelation that the overlooked daughter was actually the successful one. Stephanie's relatives suddenly seemed very interested in talking to me while maintaining polite but noticeably cooler attitudes toward Marcus. Marcus recovered first, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. "You just ruined my wedding with lies," he hissed across the table. "Nobody believes your fake success story." But his protests fell flat when multiple guests had clearly seen the bank account on my phone. Stephanie sat frozen beside him suddenly, understanding why her parents had been so concerned about her choice of husband. David Richardson approached our table with calculating eyes, the lawyer in him recognizing opportunity when he saw it. "Miss Allison, I would love to discuss your development work sometime. We have been looking for someone to modernize our firm's client management systems." His interest was genuine and professional, a stark contrast to the dismissive attitude my own family had shown for years. Dad pulled me aside near the bar, his face a mixture of confusion, anger, and something that might have been hurt. "Why did not you tell us about this?" he demanded. "How were we supposed to know you were making that kind of money?" His question revealed the fundamental disconnect that had existed between us for years. "Because you never asked," I replied simply. "You never showed any interest in my actual work, my goals, or my achievements. You assumed I would fail and treated me accordingly. Why would I share success with people who were convinced I had none?" Mom approached with tears in her eyes, finally understanding the years of overlooked accomplishments that had been happening right under her nose. She reached for my hand, but the gesture felt too little too late. The damage from years of favoritism could not be undone with a single moment of recognition. Throughout the rest of the evening, extended family members approached with awkward apologies and sudden interest in my career. Uncle Robert was particularly uncomfortable, his earlier condescension replaced with embarrassed attempts at conversation about technology and business opportunities. The shift was dramatic and revealing, showing how quickly attitudes change when success becomes undeniable. The weeks following the wedding were filled with difficult conversations and slow revelations. Dad struggled to admit the years of unfair treatment, his worldview challenged by the reality that his ignored daughter had achieved more than his celebrated son. The golden child narrative that had shaped our family dynamics for decades was suddenly irrelevant. Marcus faced his own reckoning as Stephanie and her family processed the truth about his financial situation. The fairy tale romance built on assumptions about his success began cracking under the weight of reality. Their marriage lasted 18 months before ending in divorce, with Stephanie citing fundamental dishonesty about goals and capabilities. For me, the revelation marked the beginning of healing and boundary setting. I started therapy to process years of feeling invisible and undervalued within my own family. The work was difficult, but necessary, helping me understand that my worth had never depended on their recognition or approval. I built stronger relationships with chosen family friends and colleagues who appreciated my talents and supported my ambitions. The tech community welcomed me with opportunities that exceeded my wildest expectations. My parents' opinions became less central to my sense of self-worth. Gradually, my relationship with Dad improved as he worked to overcome decades of ingrained bias about gender roles and success. The process was slow and sometimes frustrating, but genuine effort was being made on both sides. Mom had always been more supportive, but learned to speak up rather than remaining silent during family conflicts. Sometimes the people who should celebrate you the most are the last to see your worth. But your success does not need their permission to be real. The golden child label means nothing when you forge your own gold. True achievement speaks for itself, even when the applause comes late. Have you ever had to prove your worth to family members who doubted your potential? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges. Share this with someone who needs to remember that their success is valid regardless of recognition. Thank you for watching, and remember that your achievements matter even when they go unnoticed. Keep building your own version of gold.